tell you from firsthand experience that the Jewish stereotype, whatever that is to you, from Hasidic dress to conservative biblical mores, has been reinvented. Young Jews are not the Jews of yesteryear. Jessica Ravitz looks at this new generation of Jewish culture. Who is the new Jew?
Well, so this was a story where I was looking at these different trends that have been cropping up around the country. I mean, these new Jews don't represent all Jews, but they're ones who are taking on the culture and their spirituality in new ways and making it relevant to them in a secular world.
A younger, hipper, hotter heap.
Exactly.
You take a look at different aspects of this new Jewish culture. And what is it, though, to be Jewish these days? Typical Jewy things are not included.
Right.
Or they're reinvented in some way. There's a twist.
There is a twist. People who are not fulfilled by synagogues, they're not going to them, and they're creating their own places and ways to pray. You have people who are creating music where they express their Judaism. I think the most shocking images that we saw in this story were the tattoos that people are wearing now. Stars of David, Hebrew script. They're owning it in different ways, and they're not weighed down by the guilt and the pressures that have weighed on Jews for millennium.
Because the tattoo, which is what we were just looking at a second ago, is really interesting. I always grew up hearing you can't get a tattoo because you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, and of course there's this connotation of our ancestors from the Holocaust had tattoos that were forced upon them, but this is pretty in your face.
And the truth is, it's an urban legend that you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery if you have a tattoo. I spoke to rabbinical scholars who refuted that. And one woman I spoke to, who's the national director for the Jewish Funeral Directors organization, she said, what would we, if that were true, how would we honor all of our Holocaust survivors?
It's a really interesting part of the education, though, as well, because there are a lot of misconceptions. Those urban legends you were mentioning with the tattoos, and also about what is kosher and other things. You have a section on here about education. Let's watch. This is a fun video.
Any land animal that has cleft hooves and chews its cud, you can eat it. Some examples of animals no good for Jewish mandibles: camels, rabbits, hares, pigs. Water animals. Any water animal, as long as it's got fins and scales, you can eat it.
So that explains what it means to be kosher, kind of.
And the woman who created this, her name is Sarah Lefton, and she's like, Hebrew school is so boring, and she wants to make things compelling to young people, and apparently teachers at synagogues all over the country are tapping her for these videos and using these curriculum that she's created to go with them.
And probably at those schools, at least when I was in Hebrew school, we, Hava Nagila. This is not the Hava Nagila that you are featuring. In the music section of this site, we have guys like Asher Roth, who's a famous Jewish rapper. You highlight some other music. Let's take a listen to it and then talk about the roots of it.
Make room, let her dance. Shake the dust off my shoes like David. Arms in the air like a rave kid. Been trudging a little too long. We can sing a brand new song. I need a SOS.
Who was that?
So that was a group called Solico, and they blend Israeli folk songs with reggae and hip hop. And, they're traveling around the country playing in mainstream bars and clubs. And that's part of what this, group of Gen X and Y Jews are all about. They want to bridge, their Jewish lives with their secular lives.
And speaking of bars, we also have a short clip from, I love this beer tab right here. It's Hebrew.
The chosen beer.
Right, of course.
Yes. Yeah, and so the guy who makes this beer, he takes his beer seriously. He's working with great microbrewers around the country, and he takes this beer and he uses the sacred species and fruits from Israel to like make his beers Jewishly sound,
and
they're
makes it
kosher.
chosen. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, aside from the slapstick and aside from the tongue-in-cheek marketing that's used in this new Jew piece that you've done, there's also the relationship that young Jews have with Israel. And it's a lot different from our mama's Jew. You know, it's not your mama's Jew. It frankly is not the generation that we saw before that was very, very close to Israel.
Right. That's one thing we're seeing more and more of our people who are not afraid to be critical of Israel. They can love the country and love the people, but be critical of the government's policies and want a Palestinian state. A new lobbying group has sprouted up in Washington called J Street, and that's their mission. And a guy named Jay Michelson, who I quote in this article, wrote a piece in The Forward, which is a Jewish paper, about his tortured relationship with Israel. And it created a huge amount of noise. And it's just, people aren't afraid to be honest and say what they feel. Whereas, I think my grandparents certainly would have never criticized Israel, even if they were upset about something. You just bite your tongue and you support it at all costs. But, it's just people are not sticking to the rules the same way anymore.
This is a reinvention of young Jewish culture. I encourage everybody to check it out. It's on the Living page right now. New Jews. Jessica Rabbit's great piece. Mazel.
Thank you much.